our attendees today are Irish accountants, although there are going to be some of our UK audience in here as well. But one of the things as an island nation off Europe and a small island nation is that sometimes you can become insulated from what's really happening in the evolution out there in the world. And for a long time, I've been saying that Irish accountants have been a little bit behind the curve in terms of technology. That it's not, the country isn't big enough and there's not a critical mass here for people to be really interested in getting into this market. Looking at this from a global perspective, Trent, can you see that there's different approaches and different trends and different things happening across different geographic regions? Or is it pretty much a universal accountant's response to coronavirus? What could Irish people be missing?
I think it's the approach has been somewhat universal in that we're all going through the same thing. So we're feeling similar problems in that we've had to go to remote working. We've had to pull out of our offices. Our clients have all had similar challenges. Some of them have had to close down. Some of them not had to cease trading altogether. And then others have been able to pivot everything and work from home as well. The biggest difference I notice typically is the technology that's getting used in the underlying fact in each region. So specifically where cloud accounting is really popular in the UK and South Africa, and accountants that are working on those tools have pivoted slightly differently to those firms that are still using desktop solutions. And that's where the big difference has been in terms of the access they've been able to have to the data, to the way they interact with their clients. This is probably not the first Zoom webinar everyone has attended today. I'm sure it's probably the 100th you've had in the last 3 or 4 months. So there's a lot of ways that we have had to pivot how we communicate with our clients. It's not face-to-face. I noticed the phone calls have dropped for whatever reason, and everything is about a Zoom meeting. Like, let's catch up for a video call. And we always predicted this would happen eventually, but in this case, it's a virus that's forced us into this way of working. And a lot of that's here to stay. I don't see that changing in any way. But the firms that have been able to pivot and adapt and take note of what's going on around them, they're the ones that are seeing more success than the others that are kind of trying to do things the way they were doing them before.
We had a webinar yesterday, and we had a global economist on with us, Konstantin Gurdjieff. And Konstantin was talking about the state of the global economy, the European economy, a focus on the UK economy, and a focus on the Irish economy. And he was to do a 50-minute slot. Now, I think he ended up doing about an hour and a half, so he ran way over. But he said, and sure, I'm going to share some good news now. About 40 minutes in, I said to him, when is the good news coming? So he kind of accelerated through all the bad news, and he brought us to the good news. And it looks like the economy is obviously going to suffer for the next 12, 24 months. The good news that he had, though, was that the financial sector, the health sector, digital companies and digital businesses are actually going to come out of this stronger. So accountants are in there in that sector. They're going to come out of this stronger, even if there's some challenges for the next 12 or 24 months. But the one thing that was really loud and clear in terms of Konstantin's message was, from speaking to him before and after the event, technology really has been accelerated in all business sectors. And this is not just going to be an accountants-led technological change. Business owners are adapting much quicker. And now is the time for accountants to make change for themselves, their team, but also their customers. What's your thoughts on that, Trent?
I mean, we've seen it already. Anyone that's followed the Zoom progress, like their ability to increase the usage of people using their platform, I think they went from like a couple of million a day to like 50 or 60 million a day over the span of a couple of months. So we can see loud and clear that tech adoption has been a big part of what's happened during COVID. So, and it's not just the way accountants work, it's the way all businesses work, whether it's legal, lawyers, they've shifted everything to, again, remote meetings where they've had to bring in judges. They're not meeting in courtrooms anymore. Like, everyone's had to pivot in some way, shape or form, but a lot of it's been based around how do we do remote working better? How do we get better access to the data so we can make better decisions on it? And I think, we talk about cash flow and cash flow forecasting. That's been a huge, as much as we've always said you should be doing this for your clients anyway, the ones that were already doing it are now seeing a much, now getting the appetite and screaming from their clients, saying, we really, really need your help right now. And to your point, this is why accountants are so in demand, because they've always been the one, and I'll say in bookkeepers for that matter as well, they've been the ones that are so close to their clients' data. They're the ones that can understand and interpret what's going on and help them guide them out of the storm that they're in. Unfortunately, there isn't going to be a way out of the storm for some businesses, right? There was a lot of already underlying problems that throw a pandemic in there, and that's going to screw everything up. So there's a lot of hard conversations to be had, as well as there's going to be a lot of good success stories that come out of it. And I think my only good positive news I can think through, a lot of really good smart innovations have come out of depressions, and I was going to say pandemics, but we haven't had one for like 100 years. But out of these times of struggle, a lot of really good ideas and innovations do come out of that. So there will be some good things in the future that we'll see. We're going to look back at this in 5 to 10 years' time and think, wow, you know, these are the things we had to do to survive back then, and we will be better for it. I think, what do they say? What doesn't kill you only makes you stronger. Not just in a literal sense, but I mean more so just in a business surviving sense. So yeah, there's a lot of takeaways that you could break apart and dive into, but the technology element is definitely biggest recurring theme. Those that are adapting are thriving.
I don't want to state the obvious here, Trent, right? But the accounting profession and innovation, geographic regions, like Australia is a whole different culture. The UK would be reasonably well advanced, but even within the UK, there's the mavens who are out front, the early innovators, the early adopters. The profession hasn't necessarily fully embraced. Like, lots of firms use apps, lots of firms use software, lots of firms do lots of things. But the accounting profession, it hasn't fully embraced technology. And really what I'm getting at is, it's not too late for firms who haven't gone all in on technology. Now is actually the perfect time, because we've got the early adopters who have led the way and have taught the lessons. What are your thoughts on that in terms of transferring knowledge around the world and technological adoption?
Yeah, I think, you know, we always see the adoption curves that you know, they're the ones that go up like that. You've got your early majority and the late majority, and we always talk about the early majority eating the late majority and et cetera. Most of the time, we're still only looking at like 20% of even just the UK market that are digitally aware. I wouldn't even say they're digitally savvy, they're digitally aware. So there's plenty of room for anyone to make a start today, because it's not just the technology, it's the business model. Once you adapt your technology, your business model changes, and the services you provide also change as a result. We're not billing hourly, we're not billing at the end of the year. We start shifting to monthly recurring revenue. We want that subscription economy business. That's what businesses like Netflix and Spotify and everything that's in our face every day is telling us that we want to move to. And accounting is actually set up really well to move into that kind of model. So we start shifting and thinking, how do we get more monthly recurring revenue in, and making that the key focus of what we're doing every month. All of our software then starts to complement that monthly recurring model, because we're engaging with our clients more regularly. So again, to your point, it is different in each country. Some of them really fly ahead with it. I would actually say Australia's slowed down a lot. They were, to an extent. So I'll give you this statistic. So I think in Australia, there's 55% or just over are now running on cloud accounting solutions in some way, shape or form. In the UK and this part of the world, that number is probably closer to 15 to 20%. So it's a lot lower. And granted, there's a lot less, there's like a quarter of the amount of small businesses in Australia as there are to say the UK. So you would expect it's going to take a little bit more time. But COVID, as I said, is increasing that. Firms want to get online quicker, so they need their numbers and their data more reliably now than they ever have before. And this is why we're seeing such huge demand for it.
You're after saying one of my trigger words, Trent. So just indulge me for a second here, and I want to share a structure here. And I suppose many of you who are online with me will have seen this before. But the trigger word, Trent, was subscription economy. The trigger word was subscription economy. So this is the model. What's on screen in front of you now, this is the model that we work with through our Profit Pro members in terms of building more successful, more profitable, more rewarding accountancy businesses. And it starts here at the very, very bottom with getting clear on what is your trajectory and what is your desired destination. I think one of the things that the global overview economically the national economic overviews, accountants have to be aware of the pan-pression that's coming down and the impact that's going to have. Now, it's going to be challenging for everybody no matter what, but for the accountants who get ahead here, I believe there's huge, huge opportunity, because businesses and business owners are going to need accountants more than ever before, and businesses and business owners are more open to change. The one thing coronavirus has done is it's opened everybody to change. So, but we need to get clear on where we're trying to get to. And the who strategy here is around people. And again, the whole world has shifted in terms of who's. And we're seeing a generational shift with millennials and Gen Zs. But now that's compounded by the older generations are no longer prepared to work in the way that they used to. Coronavirus and the lockdown has given us a taste of what it's like to work from home and more flexible working environments. This presents a challenge and an opportunity. And nurturing your greatest asset is about your customers. And you see, here's the thing. We've got to look after our existing customers. We've got to protect those, but then we also want to grow. Now, I'm going to show you something in a couple of minutes where I think that we can grow our business by looking after our existing customers. And I'm really interested to see what Trent's ideas in terms of how Practice Ignition can help us transition customers. The trigger word that Trent gave to push me onto this and get me excited was when he mentioned the subscription model. The accountancy profession is so far ahead because we've got so many business models, because we've got recurring revenues. But the 4 Ps here is about proposition, product, price, and positioning. And you see, the old model of work is broken. The old model, or retrospective billing model, is broken. It's been broken for years. At a minimum, we need to move to fixed pricing. Actually, no, fixed pricing doesn't go far enough. Really, where we're looking at is menu pricing. Well, actually, menu pricing doesn't go far enough. Really, what we're looking at is value pricing. But actually, value pricing doesn't go far enough because we want to go beyond that to value embedded in a subscription model, a membership. Now, one of the big challenges that accountants have is, how do they get from, I've got all these existing clients, how do I shift? How do I shift and how do I move the process? There's quick wins to be had here. But this whole area of leveraging your business is about technology and systemization. Trent, one of the big difficulties, and I've just come off a 4-hour mastermind call with our Profit Pro Thrive members this morning, and this was top of the agenda in terms of how do we shift existing customers from this old traditional billing model to a monthly subscription membership model. How does PI help with that?
Yeah, there's a few things we talk through with that, and this, we talk about shifting to a fixed fee model quite often, and a lot of it starts with actually knowing what are the services that you're providing, and then how do you bundle that into those packages that make sense, but understanding the cost associated with delivering those services, because then this helps us understand the margins associated with those services, so that when we start pushing into a monthly recurring model, and again, as accountants, we should know all of our numbers. We should know our numbers on how much it costs us to deliver a service and what our margin is per service, per bundle to sort of package it all up. Once we've done that, we need to understand and apply how many of our existing clients currently get those services from us. So whether it's bookkeeping, whether it's payroll, whether it's quarterly management reporting, how many of those are applicable to those services, and how do we then start to go, okay, well, these clients are actually a good fit for this package that we put together. And you're going to find that there's about an 80% crossover most of the time. That's, you want your bundled subscription packages to have an 80% correlation with those customers. Once you do that, you can start to figure out cohorts, and we want to tackle them one at a time. So when I say a cohort, a particular group of people that have a lot of similarities. So these are all the clients we do bookkeeping for, and we probably should do or could do monthly or quarterly management reporting for them because we're doing all the bookkeeping. We've got really good data coming in. We can do really good projections to show them what's coming moving forward. The way to do that, as in how do we then get these clients doing it? It's communication and actually shaping up the value proposition. You're not going to do this for 100% of your clients on day tomorrow. We're going to start with 10, start with 5, start with 1 if you have to. Get one client sorted first, understand the conversation, have another one. review it. How did that go compared to the last one? Do we tweak it? Do we review it? Eventually, as you get used to selling this new model and new package, you'll have learned a lot of things you should do and shouldn't do, what clients are happy with and not happy with. And then by the time you want to go this at a bigger scale to 10, 20 clients, whatever it may be, you've got a lot of learning. Within that, it's just communication. There'll be emails involved. You might have a digital asset, like as you were just showing your asset before in the subscription, having those kind of assets yourself to talk through your packages and bundles and what you're trying to help them deliver, really valuable. Something to help you translate your value proposition of and what you want them to take on board to be able to get them into this new package. I don't know if that all makes sense. I know I just said a lot.
No, it does make sense, but it's the value proposition. So let's look back to the last recession, Trent, and I know the last recession was slightly different, but the last recession, the pressure came on the economy, the pressure came on the customers put pressure on the accountants' fees, and in a lot of cases, the accountants' fees dropped. I think it's the communication of the value proposition here. I think accountants can look at how they serve their customers, what they do for them, and really the issue is about the communicating of the value proposition. I think a lot of accountants are not good at communicating that value proposition at all.
Well, I mean, just shorten that sentence a little bit. A lot of accountants have not typically, and don't be offended at anyone, so it's not typically been great at just communicating in general. I see a lot of communication problems, both internally and externally. A lot of accountants and business owners aren't set up for, they're not marketing businesses, right? And we haven't spent the money to help us communicate what we're doing. So to be fair, this is why businesses like yours exist, right? Your job is to help train these accountants and community on how to communicate, how to have these conversations with their clients. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and by giving a well-structured, a well-presented proposal. Trent, when people are using Practice Ignition, so Practice Ignition, to my mind, the first time I encountered it, was kind of seen as an onboarding tool, okay? Now, I know you've become much more than an onboarding tool, because it's not just about the proposal, it's not just about winning the new business, and maybe you'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. But in terms of the communication piece, there's communicating value with new clients, but there's also a requirement to communicate value with existing clients. And right now, that's probably where the bigger opportunity is.
Oh, 100%. I mean, a lot of firms, when I speak to them, they say, so, and so for context, so Practice Ignition, the heart of it is, it started, and the idea was born out of an accounting firm in Sydney. It was a proposal that had your engagement letter embedded, so that when you wanted to create an engagement letter really quickly, but also have a nice looking proposal for your client to review, show off your brand, and then digitally sign the engagement letter, that's where the idea started back in 2012. So obviously we've developed a lot in that 7-year period. You know, there's nearly 3,500 firms, we're 150 staff and growing all the time. A lot's changed since then, but the way we think about it these days is the proposal and that onboarding helps you establish the relationship digitally. You keep track of the revenue. You know exactly what you've sold them, who you've sold it to, the engagement letter you used, who was the partner, the team members, etc. So now we start thinking about Practice Ignition more so as the place where you have all of your revenue under management, new clients, existing clients. So you start talking about repricing clients when you want to rescope, if you've got scope adjustments and whatever it may be. Depending on where you are in the world, if you're in the UK, we have a really good payments product built in. So we can trigger off payment collection, invoice deployment, job deployment into workflow systems. In Ireland, we can still do the job deployment and the invoice deployment automatically if you're using cloud tools like a Xero or a QuickBooks and Intuit. There's a lot of different ways that we do it, but it's that revenue under management. So one place to keep track of all your revenue and then things that bolt into that to make your life easier: invoices, payments, jobs, workflow, those kind of elements. That's what we focus on.
So just to understand then, so Practice Ignition not only does the initial piece, it manages your workflows, it manages your cash flows, it manages, so it assists with deadline management, resource deployment, everything in one platform, everything in one place.
Yeah, so we kind of sit as a layer on top of. So if Practice Ignition sits on top of the invoicing, the jobs, and the payments piece, then we're going to push that automatically into your job system. So you might use Carbon or Zero Practice Manager or something along those lines to manage your workflow. And once the proposal is accepted, we're automatically creating those tasks, milestones, allocating it to a team member into that relevant workflow system. So as a product, we go really deep on that functionality within the proposals, the engagement letter, and managing your bills, your invoices and payments. That's where we go really, really deep. And then we automate into your job system. So we're not a workflow tool per se, but we do work really well on deep integrations with workflow tools so that you don't have to manually create jobs and allocate it to team members.
Okay, so it works through integrations. Just like something else that strikes me as we're facing into a difficult economic time. Work in progress and debtors. One of the things that I saw time and time again in the last recession was where accountants got burned, and where, you know, they were owed amounts and they were supporting their client and supporting their customer. Trent, when you talked about the subscription model and the move to monthly payments, and of course, it's not one size fits all, folks. It's not everybody goes on a monthly payment, but I definitely think nearly everybody should be on a direct debit, even if it's a short sprint payment of 3 months or whether it's an annual monthly payment. What do you see the trends around the world, Trent, in terms of the monthly subscription model or the accelerated payment model? What's working best in your view in terms of just go monthly and keep it simple? Or if some people are prompt payers, maybe we'll just collect by direct debit in 3 installments or 1 installment. What's happening within the platform?
The biggest thing is actually just flexibility. It's being able to understand what are the client's needs and how do we help shape that. So within our platform, you can bill it upfront, you can bill it on completion, or you can bill it monthly. So if you've got a client that says, I want to pay you in 3 payments, you can set that up through Practice Ignition. Or if they said, you know what, I'm happy to pay it all up front, you can do that in Practice Ignition. In the slides I had, I was going to show off some of the stuff that's coming in the next 90 days, where we're actually introducing option pricing. So you can say, here's my starter, my pro, my scale plan. You can pick which one you want, and that will then automatically do the invoice, do the job, and potentially the payment if you're in a payment country that we support. It'll just fire that stuff automatically. So you can actually say to your client, you can pay it monthly or you can pay it annually. You give them the choice before they actually sign off on the engagement letter. So I do have a visual of that in my deck. So I was going to show exactly what that looks like and just how it presents pricing in a new way for your client. But flexibility, that's the key part. It's being able to give your client the choice of what's going to be a best fit for them.
Okay, yeah. So I like to, because I would like to share that slide, Trent, before we finish, because I like your slide. It is a good visual representation of packages and options, and it's a good slide for putting things in context.
Yeah, I'll just put it here in the background, and you can see what I mean. So, no, that's the wrong button. Present. So ideally, this is what we're saying, so that when you send it to a client, it'll look like this. So they can go between the basic plan, the pro plan. We'll actually even have a little badge that says this is the recommended package. And within that, you can clearly see the scope of the work associated with that plan. Client can then select it, and that will then push them through the flow of the proposal. Here's the rest of those services. Here's the payment schedule. Here's the engagement letter that's automatically mapped out based on the package they select. They can then digitally sign that off.
So just looking at what you have on screen here, Trent. So what you're saying is, through Practice Ignition, we can deliver a menu price proposal where there's options and tiers. They self-select within the package, and that automatically generates the final proposal, the letter of engagement, all the billing, and all the management of that entire process.
Yeah, so it's less about the menu. So you do the scoping with the client, you'll build the proposal in PI, and what you're looking at here is, it's a mock-up. As I said, it's going to be live in the next sort of 60 to 90 days. But this is the demo that we got just this week from our team, so that when I send the proposal to the client, they will see exactly this as it is. They don't adjust anything. They just look at the different plans. They can pick the one they want to go after. That will then automatically generate the engagement letter and any invoices that are attached to that automatically.
And Trent, in your experience, This is something that we experiment with our Profit Pro group. The difference between sending out a proposal and the difference between building a proposal or doing a screen share to introduce the proposal. What do you see PI users do? Do they tend to, does the software enable them just sort of have the scoping call with the client, and does the software enable it easier to pitch the proposal as such? And do they go through it on screen, or do you tend to just send it and they review in their own time?
There's two things. So we actually allow for videos to get embedded into the proposal as well. So what would typically happen before this screen would be a marketing brochure that we can show off to represent the firm, but there's also a way to record a video and have a video in the proposal that you can send to your client. Client can review it, and they can actually see you talking through it. So if you use something like Loom or Zoom, like we're doing now, record that video, put the link into the proposal, and you've got that option. Because some firms will just jump on a Zoom and talk the client through the proposal as well, and get them to then try and close and sign the proposal in that call. If you've got that option and you're comfortable doing that, perfect. If you prefer to do a video because it's late at night or whatever it may be, and you just want to get that to them, they can watch it in their own time, then that's exactly what that functionality is useful for. Being able to make sure that you can still articulate it and talk through it as if you're there, but through that recorded video feature.
Yeah, but you see, and that's really what I'm driving at, Trent, is that for the more introverted accountants or the more time-constrained accountants, we can let the proposal off and it does its own work, but equally we can do the share piece and signing and closing in real time.
100%. And that's back to what I said about flexibility too, right? So you can do either depending on what suits your flow and how you want to work. We also have video templates. So if you're an introverted person, you don't have videos, then we can actually give you a video template that shows the client how to interact through the proposal.
Okay, so it's actually it's done for you if you don't feel like hopping on a camera and having that conversation. Yeah. What kind of feedback do you get, Trent, or capture from customers, not the accountants, but the customers? Do you get any of that kind of feedback in terms of this process? Because I think it's really important. that the accountants sometimes think and live in their own heads and in their own worlds, and they don't actually see it from the client's perspective.
Yeah, the big thing I find is it actually helps showcase what type of accounting firm you are. Like if you're trying to be a digital tech savvy progressive firm, like if you consider yourself a digital progressive accounting firm, then we become a bit of a no-brainer to help you set the tone for what you want the client to expect. So a lot of clients go, oh, that was actually really easy. I understand exactly what I'm up for. I know what the services are. I know how much it's going to cost me. That's half the battle. A lot of clients just want to know what's the fee and what exactly are you doing for me? And that's exactly what Practice Ignition helps you do. So when we introduce, again, the marketing brochure feature where we can build that for you, or the video templates, all of that is to help you get your value proposition across to the client, give your client complete clarity on what they're getting charged, and then set them up on a payment process, hopefully that can't break or fail. So they know exactly, okay, this is an easy setup. I know what I'm getting, and it sets a really good first impression.
Yeah, you see, I'm a huge fan of subscriptions and membership and that recurring revenue model. As you said, Netflix, it's all around us. It's everywhere, Trent. It's that subscription membership model. I'm a huge fan of that. And with our Profit Pro members, there's some of them are racing to get to 60, 70, 80% of their revenues coming in monthly by DD. But it just strikes me talking to you here, like one of the challenges that accountants have is time. And if you were looking at existing clients and doing a conversion on existing clients to move them from the traditional historic model to either A, raise prices, provide more services, or flip people into a DD, it sounds like that this system can make that change just exponentially easier.
100%. I mean, if you're trying to set up a subscription business, Practice Ignition, again, as I said, becomes a bit of a no-brainer because we're helping you and guiding you along this model of either ad hoc fees or monthly recurring revenue. That's the fundamentals of what the idea of our product was born out of. When, again, as I said, when it's possible to use payments with us in the markets where it's available, That makes it a little bit easier again. We do have some workarounds, and I know you and I talked about a workaround earlier, Des, on how to get that payment set up on the back of a signed proposal still. And those that are interested, we're happy to talk through how to get that set up. But because the whole concept was, how do I get my invoices, payments, and jobs tied to the agreement so that when the agreement changes, everything else gets updated automatically. So it's not, as I said, it's not just about one-off getting a new client on. It's like, well, what happens when the scope of the work changes? Typically, that means you've got to manually adjust something somewhere else. And we're trying to take the pain out of manually adjusting anything. Once you've established that first relationship, we don't want you to have to worry about manually adjusting 3 systems that aren't, if they're not talking to one another.
Yeah, one of our members who is a PI user, they were explaining to me that, they'd win new business, and the excitement of winning the new business, they'd be delighted. We've won a new job. We've done this, but the engagement letters and the documentation could drag. And then what happens is that drags, and now it becomes a to-do and it's a task. And then the client, this brand new client who we're so excited to win, is now 2 months later kind of going, well, when are we all going to start here? And that dampens their experience. But then you've got the accountant who spends all this time doing billing, spends all this time on cash flow, all this time on collections, all this time on admin. It just sounds to me like, well, you can save a lot of time around that. Tell us this, Trent.
I used to joke with some firms because they'd tell me about their process. And I said, look, if I could give you 10 new clients today, like, would you want it? They're like, no, that'd be too hard. Like, I wouldn't want to do that because there'd be so much admin involved. Because it would take them, it could be an hour, 2 hours, it could be weeks of chasing them for things. And that shouldn't be the case. You shouldn't be afraid or scared of wanting to win new clients, right? That's the opposite of what we want ambitious accountants to do. So being able to set them up very seamlessly. I mean, it could take 3 to 5 minutes. That's typically what a lot of customers will say, that I can get this to you now really quickly and then have everything else set up automatically in the background. That's the win. That speed and efficiency is what we're driving for.
I'm looking at the names here that are on this webinar with us, Trent, and I'm looking at some of the names, and a lot of the people here love to win new business. They absolutely love to win new business. So, but it can be a deterrent. And the other beauty is, Trent, what you said, that, well, it's now you've tied the billing, the collections, everything is tied to change the proposal, and everything falls out of that. Trent, in terms of cost here, and maybe now I don't want to fudge if you were going to make any comments on it later, but in terms of cost, how much are you talking about to get a fully functional PI operating in your business?
So the best thing to do, depending on where you're dialing in from, is to go to the pricing page on the website. That will then redirect specifically based on the region that you're in, because it's different for in GBP versus in US dollars and so forth. For our Irish firms, we're still billing in US dollars. It starts at $75 US per month. So if you're thinking about it, takes me an hour or so to do one engagement letter, and I've got to post that to my client. With PI, it's a one-off, like per month, $75 fee to get you started. Engagement letters are in. We'll build you a marketing brochure. You can use our video templates. You can typically get the value of that back quite quickly. It depends on the volume of the usage most of the time, right? But we find it's a very limited barrier if you're a firm that is growing, winning a lot of new business, and wanting to speed up your processes. Yeah.
And what I'm thinking about is, I'm thinking about the firms on the call with us right now who have debtors, who have work in progress, who maybe they've started going down the route of the direct debit model, but they haven't got fully down there because they're blocked up with making the conversion. And so basically this is something you could accelerate through in the next 3 to 6 months to get your client base on.
100%.
How quick?
I'm going to show actually, because we have a really rigorous onboarding process to help firms get up to speed really quickly. And I did include that in some of the slides I was happy to share, because I wanted to give everyone an idea what that looks like. And we pride ourselves on this, and we get a lot of feedback on this as well. But typically when your journey starts with us, we think about you in 2 ways. We want to make sure your first 90 days is as efficient as possible. So you get lined up with what we call a customer success manager. And in that first 90 days, here's the 3 things you can expect to happen in those meetings. So first call is about just set up, training, getting used to the system. Within the next 2 weeks, we want you to get into your workflow integrations, your library review. We'll consult you on best practices within that. And then by the end of that first 3 to 4 weeks, making sure you're getting proposals created and sent out to a client. Once we get through that, you get to the 6-week mark, the 9 to 12-week mark, we then pivot you into one of two different teams, depending on where you're at in your journey with us. In one hand, you've got our education specialists. They're designed to help you keep learning on the product if you feel like you need to get more training and education. Then we've got our account managers that focus specifically on strategy and your use of practice ignition. So if you said, I've got 500 clients I need to roll into the platform, our account managers will build a strategy with you and help you stay accountable to getting all of that in place. If you said, I need to do a training session with my team and get much deeper knowledge on all the functionality of PI, that's where our education specialists play a really key part in helping you do that. Once you've got training down pat and up to speed, you can then transition across to the account management team. As part of the work those account managers do, they actually help you do a mapping session. So they will sit down with you and say, let's look at your process end to end, your sales process, what needs to happen from a lead coming in all the way to getting it into PI. And this is an example of a mapping session that we can do and have done with practice ignition customers. So you kind of get the full service. We want to roll out the red carpet. It's not just, don't just buy the product, buy our support, training and knowledge to help you implement our product in the rest of your tools effectively. That's our goal.
Yeah, and that's, you see, it's not just about the technology. Lots of people buy technology, lots of people buy apps, lots of people buy stuff, and it's kind of like scratching an itch. You know, it makes you feel good because you bought an app. It's about the implementation and it's about the use. And the technology
100%.
is the tool, but I love this process. The other thing that I love here, Trent, could you just scroll back to the 2 previous slides that you looked at? Go back to the previous one now. So your journey with us as a customer, there's something that I think is really important here and really meta that accountants don't actually do. And that's when accountants take on a new client, that they give them a success path. Like, here's what's going to happen the first call. Here's what's going to happen the second meeting. Then we go on to the third meeting. Then we go on to the next slide. And we're bringing the client through the process of, here's how we're going to get a result for you. I love that concept, and I love the concept of mapping out the entire sales process. And sometimes
100%.
I find,
and this is we get so much feedback on how well this works, and we know this works because we've onboarded, like, we can onboard 150 to 200 accounting firms every month at the moment, and they all run in 3-month cycles, as you can imagine, from that first 90-day period. And we're trying to make sure, like, we have more I call it post-sale, but we have more post-sale team members than we do pre-sales, right? Because pre-sale, it's a consultative approach. We sometimes bring the account managers into those pre-sale conversations to help you understand your workflow and all the other systems you might want to do. Sometimes we do the process mapping before you even become a customer so that we can help you understand where is this all going to fit in. But I love being able to show this off because A, we get a lot of really good positive feedback about it. B, it gives you a really good idea of what we're committed to doing for you if you're keen and committed to buy into our process.
yeah, but it's a roadmap that is replicable for the firm. It's the roadmap that the firm should follow.
100%.
Yeah. So in terms of the process, I love what you say, Trent, about, you describe them as customer success agents. This is actually something that I've been talking to Irish accountants, in particular our Profit Pro members, for the last 6 to 8 months, that we're not just accountants. Really what our role is to get the result for the client. It's the success agent piece. And I think sometimes what happens with particularly new business, that sometimes there's a whole lot of excitement and enthusiasm about winning the job, but then it all just goes off like a damp squib. Whereas your process there just brings it nicely through. So we haven't had any questions yet, Trent. Everybody is very, very quiet today.
There was one question that I did address just then, but I'll bring it up anyway. Rory mentioned about payments and whether we can set up payments in Ireland. And I kind of said at the start as well, we don't currently have a deep payments platform built into Ireland, but we do have some workarounds that can work. It's not deeply integrated. It basically means we get everything set up, proposals signed, do the pricing. We can do the invoicing if it's in Xero or QuickBooks still. And then once the client has signed it, we can redirect them to a payment page or a link to your payment page with your chosen payment partner. Des, I think you had a recommended payment solution for Irish.
There's a number of payment providers. The one that we work with and our Profit Pro members have worked with very, very successfully is NuaPay. NuaPay, you can literally, if you go to the pillar banks like Bank of Ireland, AIB, it could take 6 months to get set up. Bank of Ireland, if you fight with them really hard, you might get it done in 3 to 6 months, but you need a software provider to sit on top of that. If you're looking for a software provider to sit on top of one of the pillar banks, you're probably talking about DebitPay would be the one that we would see there. But NuaPay is actually a payment provider in its own right. You can be set up within 5 days. And all you have to do is, so we recently have become PI clients, and what we're doing is we're basically just going to put in the NuaPay link into the PI proposal. It still all feeds back in, but I think Stripe are the PI payment platform. So Stripe, they have DD facilities in the UK. You'd think the lads from Limerick would have it in Ireland. It's definitely on the pipeline. We're significant Stripe users and Stripe fans, so we've been in touch with Stripe. It is coming, and as soon as that lands here, well, now you'll have end-to-end integrated functionality embedded within PI.
Our plan is to have payments parity in all regions. So the only reason we don't offer it in regions is just we physically can't through our, again, we're a white labeled Stripe partner, so you don't see the payment system in Practice Ignition as in to say Stripe. It's all embedded and it just looks like it's a Practice Ignition system in that sense. And it very much is because of the way we've deeply integrated it in with the invoicing, the jobs and everything else. It's not just like a standard Stripe connection. I think we spent a couple of million trying to get it heavily embedded into our product. So, at which point it does solve some really cool problems as a result of that. So if you are in the UK, there's a big difference of the payments that we offer in Practice Ignition compared to either a standalone Stripe or a Go Cardless or anything along those lines. So.
I see Agatha has a question here that's not necessarily core and central to today, but we'll answer it anyway. Agatha, always happy to answer questions. You were talking about talking with a client via Zoom, but is this compliant with GDPR? I suppose, Agatha, there's a lot of talk about Zoom at the outset of coronavirus not being GDPR compliant, and there have been security breaches and issues. You'll have noticed Zoom has upgraded significantly over the last 3 to 6 months. My understanding, Agatha, is, and I'm not definitively saying this is the case, I don't think Zoom could continue to operate if they hadn't tightened up on their GDPR loopholes. Is Zoom GDPR compliant? I can't say so. We actually did research this. We researched it in depth because a technology company approached us in March and said that they were going to notify all their clients they shouldn't use Zoom. And we said, actually, why don't you go talk to our account manager? Now, I don't think they ever communicated and said, don't use Zoom. So obviously Zoom were able to satisfy them. Zoom is as GDPR compliant as a telephone call. It's as GDPR compliant as Microsoft Teams. From our perspective, we would not use a product, Agatha, if we thought it wasn't. So I'm not a GDPR expert, but I suppose the guys here internally have satisfied me that Zoom is as secure as any other platform. And we believe that they wouldn't be able to operate. Do you have any thoughts on that, Trent?
Yeah, I mean, we had the virtual summit that we were heavily involved in back in May. You were obviously a guest speaker on the virtual summit as well. And I was responsible for all the logistics, the systems. In partnership, we had a really good colleague to help get it all in place. But we ran 17,000 people through Zoom over 2 days, and we had to go through and check this off ourselves. We were very happy with the requirements and standards met, and we use Zoom every other day and week for everything. So I'm very happy and confident with the product they've got from a security standpoint.
Trent, is there, in absence of more questions, so there's a comment in from Dermot, the visualization process for the client. Is there anything more, Trent, in terms of in your slide deck that you want to share as we come into the end of the session? Now, just one thing, JR, maybe you can put it up in the chat box. For anybody for anybody attending here today, and this is an ongoing offer for our Profit Pro members, for anybody attending today, you can get a 6-month discount, a 20% discount for 6 months. So JR, perhaps you will put that up in the chat box. We just have a code. It's very, very simple. I can't remember it now, so I'm not going to say it until JR posts it. But I think it's, yeah, it's Profit Pro 20. So if you do decide, if you do decide to go ahead and subscribe to Practice Ignition, if you just put in Profit Pro 20, you will get a 20% discount on any subscription for 6 months. And JR has that up there. Anything else in your slides, Trent, that you think would be of value to share with our audience today?
The big thing is just the customer feedback. Like this is one we got 27th of July. We get them on a few places. The Zero Review place is one, QuickBooks is another. But I pulled this one as it was pretty recent. It was only 27th of July. The biggest thing is that there was so much in this comment. I'm not going to read it word for word. I'll let you read it. But it just allowed, there was so much we were able to help this firm with specifically. Now, they were a Xero firm using Xero Practice Manager, but allowing us to eliminate so much of the manual work, the debtors, the support they received, the onboarding support that I went through before is all made mention of within this comment. So if you're a little bit curious, I'd encourage you, you're going to get an email from me at some point today, saying, hey, come and test this out, have a chat, have a look at it at a more deeper level. We have trials. You have a great offer as part of the Profit Pro relationship as well that you're entitled to. So yeah, it's very risk-free in that sense.
Do you know, there's a word stands out for me on that slide, and beautiful professional proposals. And there's something that you've said a couple of times in different ways throughout today's session, Trent. And that's about that. For me, it's about standing out and differentiating. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story now, and any of our Profit Pro members who are at our mastermind this morning, and please forgive me because you're going to hear the same story twice. But there was this nature photographer, and he was a globally renowned nature photographer, and he used to go around the world and get these unbelievable pictures of animals, wild animals in their natural habitat. And he was down in deepest Africa, and they were deep in the jungle, and he was trying to capture this picture and capture this pride of lions in their natural environment. And he had a local guide, and his local guide used to come out each morning and barefooted with his staff and his backpack, and they'd hike into the forest and deep into the jungle, and they'd pick spots. So this guy was a tracker, and he used to track the lions, and then they'd pick vantage points so where the photographer could get the photographs. So on the second or third day of their trip, they hit the jackpot. They were literally at a watering hole in a bush, and less than 15 yards away was this pride of lions. So the photographer is getting some of the best photographs of his life. And next thing, the guide sneezes. The lions look, but they don't see them in the bushes, so they just go back to doing what they're doing. Next thing, he sneezes a second time. Now, at this stage, the lions look over and they begin to approach the hide. And the photographer is looking at his guide going, what do we do now? So the guide opens up his backpack, takes out a pair of runners and starts putting them on. And the photographer says, what are you doing? And the guide says, I'm going to run for it. And the photographer says, you can't outrun a pride of lions. And the guide said, I don't have to outrun the pride of lions. I just have to outrun you. And in terms of differentiating, we're facing into a time of economic challenge. And yes, we're going to come out the far side of it. But the next 12 to 18 months, in terms of attracting and retaining clients, sometimes it's the small things that make a difference. So the tool here is something that works in your practice. But, the beautifully designed proposals, what type of client do you want to attract and retain? And would that client feel more comfortable in the hands of a tech-savvy accountant who produces a proposal that gets an answer like this. You just need to outrun the firms that are not going to make it. You just need to outrun the firms that are going to be in more trouble than you. You don't have to be first past the post. You just have to be ahead of the field. So that's an unbelievable testimonial, really, to get Trent. Trent, final observations. If you were advising accountants 3 things that they should do post-corona, what would you be recommending that they do?
A good question, and you're putting me on the spot. I think the biggest thing is adaptable and just staying in the know. I think speak to all of your clients, understand where they're all at, understand where all of your revenue is at the moment. Like, what is that tied up in? And I think within that, trying to understand what are the services that should we be chatting to our clients about that are going to help them survive. So I think number one, clients, focus on all your clients, speak to all of them. Where are they at, and how do we make sure they survive through this for the next 6 months? At the same time, I think check on your team. How are they going? Because this is very stressful for everyone at the moment. So what are you taking out of this that's going to stay, whether it's remote working? I've spoke to a lot of firms that are like, our team don't want to come back to the office, and that will happen. So I think you need to think about how do we move forward in this new world that we've had to create as a result of that. And then third thing is just keep staying adaptable. Just keep staying, because things are changing so regularly at the moment. I know we keep talking about whether there's going to be a second wave of this thing or whatever it is. I don't think we're out of it yet. I think there's going to be more and more things that will get thrown at us this year. Being an Australian, there's been so many things thrown at that country this year that I don't know. They'll either keep tackling more things, or they'll just eventually it's all going to fall over, from bushfires to floods to viruses to everything. So be adaptable, stay aware of what's going on around you. But yeah, clients, team members, stay adaptable.
There's a question in there from Agata. Agata is tearing to get going, Trent. Can I talk with somebody in practice ignition, and what option is the best for me? What's the best place for people who are interested in progressing? What's the best place for them to get information, Trent?
It's a great question. And yes, you can definitely speak to someone about that. So when you go to practiceignition.com, which I'm sharing up here, there is a little button here that says book a demo. And even if it's not necessarily a demo, you just want to speak to someone, I'd recommend clicking on that. That will then pop up a little section here. And I'd say go in the UK or Europe-based section. And then within that, you'll be able to pick a time that works specifically for you. And you can see that whether it's tomorrow, Friday, or any time in the next 2.5 weeks, you can see here specifically what will work. So go in, book a demo, speak to our team members, and they can talk you through exactly what is the best plan. You'll also see the pricing page at the top here, which I'd recommend you check out to get a better idea as to how this all works.
Can you just go back to book a demo? Here's a little bit of meta teaching. A number of our Profit Pro members are doing this at the moment, whereby they're setting up times when basically either new or existing clients. So for some, what we're doing is, well, they've got a portal where existing clients can go in and book their calls and book their interactions. Or for new clients here, exactly as Trent is showing you. So you see here, Trent is using Calendly. You can see it powered by Calendly up in the corner. It's a reasonably simple install if you have a site. But this is part of the new communication model. This is part of, clients don't drop into the office anymore. They go onto your website, they book a Calendly, we hop on a Zoom. This is part of being more accessible, and this is part of being more interactive. So that's a good point. A good teaching point as well, Trent. Trent, we're coming into the final couple of minutes. Final question, Trent. The digital world, what does the future look like from your perspective?
It's a good question. I think we've been focusing so much on getting everyone onto the cloud, and I think a lot of it's because we're just trying to get better data so we can make better decisions. So I think that still needs to happen, because as I said before, we're only 25% of UK that's on cloud accounting. I think that number is probably a lot less in Ireland, if I'm honest, knowing that Xero and Intuit are only just starting to do a launch in there. So I think the sooner we can get to like mass market adoption of things like cloud will help us lead to better decision making, better reporting, and that leads to different services around. You can still do monthly and quarterly management reports, but you've got to do a lot more work to get that data up to date in the first place. And that's so I think for the next couple of years, we're going to see a lot more adoption of that still to happen. And then, just as things get faster and more systemized, that will then change the role the accountant has with the client or the work teams are doing internally, because you'll be getting more of the tools to systemize and automate as much as you can, still with guidance of a team member. It's not completely hands-off. It'll be different quality checks through the process. I can see everything being a lot more customer-centric and a lot more processes getting systemized and automated where possible.
And Trent, the last question: when people talk to me about technology and adopting tech stacks and adopting this app or that software, one of the things, so we've got a 15-point checklist where we get people to help them make decisions. But one of the key questions to be asked in that checklist is, past development and future development path. What does the future development path look like for PI at the moment? You've innovated and evolved from a very simplistic but important start of just making letters of engagement easier, through to an onboarding tool, now through to a kind of a revenue and client management tool. What does the future look like for you, Trent?
I kind of alluded to it a bit earlier. Our big focus is on flexibility within the functionality. So when we first started, we were a very rigid product. You can only build things monthly, right? You couldn't do it upfront or on completion. The next release of our product is we've done a massive rebuild in the last 12 months. Cost a lot of money and a lot of time to get the full rebuild in place. And that will allow firms to bill more flexibly in all the different crazy ways you can think of. And you wouldn't think there'd be that many crazy ways, but I get some firms like, I want to bill them quarterly, but then I want to bill them again in 6 months after that, a different fee for a different service, and then all these other mixtures. So our job is to make sure you can bill absolutely everything in our product. And then once we've allowed you to do that, we need to make sure that you can invoice for all of that automatically, collect the payment automatically, and deploy the jobs automatically. So you'll see a lot more emphasis on those areas, integrations to more tools, more functionality and flexibility to create and manage those relationships.
Excellent.
And going deeper, we're not, what I will say is a lot of people say, you're going to do workflow. I'm like, probably not. Like, there's so many workflow tools and they're doing a great job. We would rather pour millions of dollars that we have invested in our business into making it a more richer, deeper, more functional product, and really nailing that element and plugging into the software that you want to use to manage your workflow reporting and general ledger and all that kind of stuff.
Super stuff. Well, folks, we're just on top of the hour, so we're going to wrap it up here. First of all, I want to thank Trent for taking the time out to join us today. I want to thank Trent for his contribution. I've written down 5 or 6 ideas. I hope you've gotten takeaways. Any webinar I go on, I'm looking for one good takeaway. I've got 5 or 6 bullet points here. I hope you've got as many. In terms of, if you're interested in subscribing to Practice Ignition, Trent has given you the link. Book a demo. Make sure and use your Profit Pro 20 code to get a 20% discount. Trent, thank you. Everybody who's here live, thank you. Until we see you again, let's get it done.
Thanks, Des. Thanks, everybody.